Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we will be breaking down all things Bills, Raiders, and peeking ahead to next week's game at the Washington Commanders. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Air Raid Hour on this Victory Monday. And things are always better on a Victory Monday. The Buffalo Bills defeated the Las Vegas Raiders 38-10. Pops Mafia already coming in saying, I still can't believe how many Bills fans were booing after that first drive. I'm not gonna lie. When I heard the boo birds coming down to that first drive, I was a little shocked to hear that, but the Buffalo Bills quickly righted the ship on their way to victory. And speaking of booing, I know you weren't probably booing from your living room, but there was definitely a sense of anxiety, I think, for both of us heading into this game after the way the Buffalo Bills performed last week. Would they come out flat? Would they lay an egg? Would they have sort of a dominant performance like they did? There was a level of unknown heading into this game. Where is your anxiety level? How far has it come down? Because the Jets are a really good football team without Aaron Rodgers. We lost to them. And then we curb stomped a Las Vegas Raiders team who's probably middle of the pack in the National Football League. So how far down has your anxiety come from after what we witnessed week one?
Well, I think one, it just shows you how week to week the NFL is. And we say this every season when it comes to even just Bills games week to week. Like, you just never know what's going to happen. Obviously, the Jets get curb stomped by the Cowboys, couldn't move the ball on offense at all. Cowboys, did whatever they needed to win that game. And you look back and you kind of get a little frustrated, maybe thinking like, man, the Bills let one slip through their grasp. But then you kind of fast forward a week, you see this Raiders team who had played a really good defensive game against the Broncos a week ago, kept with their running game, even though it struggled against the Broncos. And look, the Raiders were kind of a kind of fun upset pick against the Bills this past week from some outlets. And the Raiders were atop the Raiders were atop the AFC West. They were the only team who had won. And the Bills were coming off like a pretty bad offensive performance, right? And so you kind of enter this game, and if you're the fans in the stadium, you see this first drive go 3 and out, and there's a little bit of anxiety there. You're like, is this team going to be able to turn the corner? And then they did. So look, my anxiety level has certainly gone down several notches. I will say this though, I disagree slightly. I think the Raiders are a bottom third team in the NFL. I don't think they're a very good football team. I think they have a lot of top end talent, but they're not deep. Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Max Crosby, Garoppolo, serviceable. They have some okay other pieces, but they are really they're a team of 3 stars, right? And the rest kind of is like trailing behind. So while it does notch down my anxiety a lot. And it looks like the Bills are going to come out of, unless something weird happens in these other Monday night games, the Bills are going to come out of week 2 as the highest scoring team of week 2, 38 points. It certainly makes you feel a lot better heading into this week 3 game against the Commanders, who have been pretty decent on offense so far in 2023 with Sam Howell at the helm. So, yeah.
Yeah, we play the Commanders next week. They're 2-0, but it's kind of like an asterisk 2-0 because it's the Arizona Cardinals and the Denver Broncos, the 2 teams that they have defeated. But we get to play an undefeated team next week. We get to play maybe another middle of the pack to lower third team in the Washington Commanders next week. My anxiety level isn't going to come down until we play a good opponent again, like a good opponent again, like the Miami Dolphins, and we play them well. We play them tight. We look competent. But I definitely feel a lot better about this football team now than I did last Monday watching that game against the New York Jets. And it's not even just the Bills' performance yesterday that's making me feel a lot better. It also has to do a little bit with just watching this Monday Night Football game and how
Mm.
inept the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns are. Like, they're not great. And there's a lot of teams that maybe were considered fringe playoff teams or teams competing for playoff spots in the AFC, even in the NFC, and looking at New Orleans, and they just look very mid. And the Buffalo Bills, even though it was an inferior opponent, looked anything but mid yesterday. So that's something to get excited about. Before we get into our biggest takeaways, and there's a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of comments that we're going to get to in a moment, couple of injury updates. Only 2 real key injuries came out of that game. Micah Hyde with a hamstring, Leonard Floyd with an ankle. Both Sean McDermott said today were day to day. If for some reason Micah Hyde, whose this hamstring is lingering, because this was something that had us concerned before week 1, if that lingers, it will probably be Taylor Rapp into the starting lineup next week and DeMar Hamlin activated. And then Leonard Floyd, if he can't go, Kingsley Jonathan would step into the rotation and AJ Epinesa would step into the starting lineup. Obviously, you'd like to have both of those guys in next week, but if it's just if Floyd needs a week, if Hyde needs a week, I think this defense could survive. And I'd rather them deal with those injuries now and get them settled than have play through something and re-aggravate it. Because it seems like that's what Hyde did, was re-aggravate an old hamstring injury.
Yeah, and those injuries always worry me more than like, you know, sometimes even it sounds bad, but sometimes even concussions worry me less from a getting back on the field standpoint than these soft tissue injuries. I'm not trying to obviously dismiss or minimize head injuries, but like these soft tissue injuries always give me a lot of concern. We've seen Jordan Phillips over the years miss a lot of time with injuries like that, and if you come back too soon, it tends to be a huge detriment, right? And it tends to be one of those things where you just never get all the way back and you aggravate it or whatever. So you really need to make sure you get all the way back from these things. Like, look at Cooper Kupp going into this season, right? Like, he aggravated his hamstring right before the season starts. He ends up going on IR before the season starts. And you see stuff like that happen, and you don't want guys like Micah Hyde and Leonard Floyd to miss a lot of time. You want Leonard Floyd to be ready to roll when Vaughn's back, so that like duo with Gregory Rousseau is ready to kind of to eat, right? And Micah Hyde, you want back obviously sooner rather than later as well. But like we've talked about, again, like the tough part of the schedule comes in as you start to get to that middle third and latter third of the schedule. So make sure these guys are back to 100% before you put them back in. Like, the Bills dealt with a ton of injuries last year, including to Micah Hyde. In a way, maybe that's a blessing because they have gone through it pretty bad, right, a year ago. So hopefully, hopefully they can get back sooner rather than later. But I don't want to rush them back necessarily. And if they have to miss this game, so be it.
All right, our weekly challenge for you guys this week, and a way you can always help us here at the Air Raid Hour, is when this show is done being live. And obviously, comment away in the comment section. We'll get to the live comments. But when this show is done being live, our weekly challenge for you, comment on this video with your biggest takeaway from week 2, the Buffalo Bills versus the Las Vegas Raiders. What is the number one thing you took away from this game? The number one thing you want to see carrying into the following weeks of the season? And we will go through over the course of the week and we will respond to each and every one of you. So that is our weekly challenge. It's a way you can help us out, helps us, boost us with the algorithm, etc. Obviously, smash that like as well. So let's get into it and let's start talking about our biggest takeaways from this game. And there's going to be a dozen or so takeaways that we have in this football game, but I want to focus first on just the game was over. We're sitting there. We're thinking about what just happened. What is the number one thing that we're taking away? Because there are dozens. What's the number one thing we're taking away? Spin 0481 comes in and says Spencer Brown and his play gives him a lot of hope for the season. Jessica Tennis came in and says Josh getting the ball out fast within offense helped everyone. These are sort of examples of what I'm looking for. And you can comment in the comment section as well with what you believe was your biggest takeaway from week 2 of the NFL season, as I'm watching my fantasy season absolutely collapse because I think I have no more running backs left after, was that Nick Chubb that is leaving the field as well. So, Dave, what is your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, and you know, when you sent me the notes before the show and you're like biggest takeaway one thing, and then we're gonna talk about the offense and the defense as well, positive and negative takeaways. You know, a couple of those things that people mention are gonna come up, I think, again in the offensive section for me. So I guess big picture, right? For me, big picture thematically, my biggest takeaway from this game was I guess I'll sum it up in one word: purpose. And I say
Mm-hmm.
that because to me, on both sides of the ball, the Bills came out, they felt like they had a purpose. And when what I mean by that is like on offense, right? There was deliberate motion, there was deliberate progression, there was a deliberate game plan, a script of plays, and it seemed like the Bills had purpose in every play they ran. It didn't seem like they threw away or like gave away any plays, any cheap, like just like we're just gonna kind of go out here do whatever. Like every play, it seemed like they had a purpose that they were trying to do something positive with, and that then from a
Mm-hmm.
game plan perspective translated into the execution, and in the execution you saw that as well. So to me, purpose and execution were the themes of the day. It was nice to see that after, last year at times we questioned what was the vision, what was the purpose of this offense under Ken Dorsey. And to me, I think you saw a lot of growth from Ken Dorsey now, even to the latter stages of last year into the first couple games of this year, and especially the biggest takeaway in this Bills Raiders game to me is that purpose on offense, notably with Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen kind of at the helm there. And so that to me gives me that's part of the biggest reason why my anxiety levels have notched down a few. But man, it felt like the Bills were on a mission. They were taking care of business. Whatever term you want to use, it just felt very deliberate to me, and it was really nice to see because there's been at times where we haven't really felt like it, and we felt like it's been a lot of backyard football.
Mm-hmm. Renaissance Man comes with a great comment. He says, so many takeaways, but my focus is on Ken Dorsey. How many people wanted him gone last year? Yes, it's only 2 games in, but he looks a lot more creative and knows when and how to attack defenses. Yeah. I mean, Eric Turner's already sort of been in the lab on Twitter, on social media, posting videos on this YouTube channel. You can check those out, posting clips on Twitter of sort of what Ken Dorsey drew up this week. And it was a lot of getting the balls in the hands of running backs, getting the balls in the hands of tight ends, making this offense more versatile, doing things like chipping Max Crosby to take the best player away from the other team's defense, to not let a game wrecker be a game wrecker. So a ton of positives from what Ken Dorsey drew up. For me, my biggest takeaway was the way the Buffalo Bills dominated an inferior opponent and did
Mm,
not allow them at any point in this game to get back in once the Buffalo Bills had control. Yes,
yeah, good call.
the Las Vegas Raiders came out to a quick start at 7-0. Everyone got really probably heated and upset. The Boo Birds came down, right? And then the Bills came out and went run, incomplete pass, punt, and then the Boo Birds really started to rain down at one Bills drive. But after that, the Buffalo Bills just absolutely throttled the Las Vegas Raiders. They had an opportunity for a double dip, even though it was a very untraditional double dip, because I thought they were going to have a nice 6-minute drive. They get stuffed at the goal line, but then they get the ball back, get the ball down and score with Gabriel Davis. And then out of the half, they come out and then they go for it on 4th down twice to get the double dip, 14-point double dip. So instead of like, it could have been, it could have been 16 to like 10 or 20 to 10 or something like that. No, it was 28 to 10 by the
Mm-hmm.
next time the Las Vegas Raiders saw the football, because of the way the Buffalo Bills went out there. They were aggressive on 4th down. They executed properly. They put an inferior opponent away. They never let the Las Vegas Raiders even score in the second half of this football game. They dominated possession. I don't have the statistic in front of me. I didn't have a chance to pull it up before the show tonight, but at one point CBS was like, the Buffalo Bills have had 47 plays in the Las Vegas Raiders territory. The Las Vegas Raiders have run 30 plays the entire game. Like the Buffalo Bills were literally living past the 50-yard line. They were marching the ball down the field on these long, sustained drives, and they were forcing the Raiders into 3-and-outs, 6-and-outs, etc. So the Buffalo Bills, 3 turnovers in the game, right? The Buffalo Bills did what they had to do to dominate an inferior opponent, and I don't think we saw enough of that alpha attitude last year. The Detroit Lions ended up being a lot better, right? Because they went on that streak after they lost to the Buffalo Bills, but we couldn't put the Lions away last year. We couldn't put the Browns away last year. There were a number of occasions where we played inferior opponents last year, and it was a game, it was a nail biter up into the fourth quarter because we were making mistakes, because we weren't executing, etc. The Buffalo Bills put the Raiders away. We rested comfortably that entire second half. There was no stress. There was no worry. So to me, that was my biggest takeaway from week 2. And I don't know why, but I keep wanting to say week 1. I think it's because I just want to forget this Jets game ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, my friend who's a Raiders fan, I felt kind of bad for I decided that while the Bills were blowing him out, I wasn't going to text him. As Charles says, Las Vegas ran 39 plays total. I put a tweet out today. The Bills had over 40 minutes in possession, which is really unheard of in today's NFL. You go back and in 2022, the Commanders had the highest average time of possession of any team at 33 minutes. And obviously the 40 minutes is an outlier, but you start thinking about the team that had the highest average time of possession and that only being 33 minutes. And the Bills cleared that by 7 minutes. It's pretty impressive. Like it felt like the Raiders never had the ball in the third quarter at all.
Yeah, I mean, someone just put the stat up in the comment section too. Like at one point in the third quarter, it said the Buffalo Bills had the ball for 12 minutes, right? So like the Raiders had the ball for like just over 2 minutes in the entirety of the third quarter. That was it for the Raiders. Obviously, they had it a little bit more in the fourth quarter, but still not a lot. The Buffalo Bills dominated this football game. And we're going to get to more of our positive takeaways in a moment. We're going to talk about maybe some areas of concern that we saw, things that can be fixed before we head to face the Commanders next week. But before we do, a quick word here from the guys over at the Cover One Buffalo podcast.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right. Let's get to the positive takeaways, and there are a lot of them from the Buffalo Bills offense. Let's start with Josh Allen. And Josh Allen in this football game, he was, and let me pull up my stats here. He was 31 of 37 for 274 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was sacked twice. He had one long run called back from offsetting penalties. But other than that, only ran 3 times for 7 yards. So truly a rebound, truly a banner day from Josh Allen. I was watching Monday Night Countdown as I was making dinner tonight, and they gave him their first ever Hemi Award on Monday Night Countdown as they were trying to, I think, maybe copy some of the stuff that Good Morning Football does with the angry runs, etc. They had a Hemi Award, sort of like their version of like the best player or the MVP of week 2 of the season, and they unanimously gave it to Josh Allen for his performance. What were your thoughts on Josh Allen and his performance in this game?
Well, the Boo Birds came out early on that first 3 and out, but I think we knew what kind of game Josh was going to play based on that 3 and out, right? We had the 2 runs and we had Josh scrambling to his right and a situation where he probably didn't want to give that drive away, but instead ran out of bounds, took his medicine, didn't try to force anything. And I think that was telling to me that on the first drive of the game after the Raiders had gone down and scored, that he still showed some patience and still didn't force anything. From that point on, I figured it was going to be a pretty, good decision-making, deliberate game from Josh Allen. And so that's what we end up seeing. And there was some comment Trent Green made at one point when he was like 9 for 9 for like 58 yards. He's like, oh, he was 9 for 9 last year, but I bet it was for more than 58 yards. And he's like, he's only got like 5 yards a clip. Well, it was like, yeah, but look at what they're doing to the Raiders. They're like converting all these third downs. They're converting on fourth downs, right? And it was just very clear to me that the message was received from whether it was Sean McDermott or just the message to himself after the way that Jets game went, that he had to adjust. And the thing is, we've seen this from Josh Allen in the past, right? He has typically rebounded well from bad games, and he did so again. So now the question will be, can he continue to play this way? I don't think he or the team are going to complain about a stat line like he had in this game, even though maybe the yards per attempt and the yards per completion aren't as high as like we'd like to see. I mean, it's tough to argue with the results. 94%, like they said, adjusted completion percentage. And man, just a real surgical game, as Renaissance Man put in the comments, surgical performance by 17. And man, what more can you say? He was just flawless.
And you just got to look at the trends too. Like passing yards are down around the league because defenses are putting an emphasis on this too deep shell and making quarterbacks take the stuff underneath and be patient and be disciplined and put out these long sustained drives. I mean, you saw it last night in the Sunday Night Football game. At one point, I think Bill Belichick created a new defense where he just put 3 safeties in center field to try to stop the Miami Dolphins. And Tua Tagovailoa didn't have a ton of yards. He had to take, and he was forced to take the underneath stuff, and they were forced to count on their running game. And both of those things worked as they defeated the New England Patriots. But I said in the pregame show, Josh had to earn some trust back. Josh earned a lot of trust back this week. But I think now what we need to see is consistency from week to week. Did week 1 embarrass him so badly that he will forever change? Or did week 1 embarrass him so badly that he will change for 1 week and then go back to his old ways? That is what we need to keep an eye on as the months progress. Because if Josh Allen is playing quarterback like that, and Ken Dorsey is being creative and calling up a game plan like that, if the playmakers on this football team are making plays like that, this is a Super Bowl caliber team. Like 100%, this is a team that will make the playoffs and will make a run at the Super Bowl. But it needs to stay consistent week to week. And then we need to get hot at the right time towards the end of the football season. But obviously, the one thing I will say about Josh Allen taking the underneath stuff and him not having a lot of yards too is the fact that he's not Trent Edwards. He's not Tyrod Taylor. Right? Like, he is elite of the elite when it comes to being a physical specimen. He is the elite of the elite when it comes to making plays down the football field at the quarterback position. But in dinking and dunking and showing that patience and showing that discipline, in being able to be that quarterback that can beat you by death by 1,000 paper cuts, it might not be this week. It might not be next week. It might not be the week after. It might not be until a month, 2 months from now. At some point, teams will be like, well, this isn't working. We got to get out of these 2 deep shells because he's just killing us. And he is just holding onto the ball, and they are just working the ball down the field for these 10-minute drives. And our offense is never seeing the field. At some point, if Josh Allen keeps doing what he's doing, defenses are going to have to adjust to that because he shows the patience, he shows the discipline, and then it's going to open up a ton of stuff down the field, which is what he's also really, really good at. Because that's what happens when you have a subpar quarterback. They dink you, they dunk you, the defenses adjust, and then that quarterback can't go down the football field. Josh can, right? And Josh also has the ability to use his legs. So just be patient, Josh, and we got to see that consistency from week to week now.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we know by watching him play that he, like, compared to like a Trent Edwards, who their immediate thought was to check down, right? Josh is the opposite, right? I think in almost all scenarios, is probably, his first thought is to try to get the big play, and then kind of goes to the check down when he needs to, or goes to the safe option when he needs to. So, like, if you look, it works, right? In today's NFL, it's working, and it's like he still threw for, almost 300 yards. So it wasn't like it was like a 31 completion, 200-yard performance, right? I mean, he still made some big plays. Obviously, he got the free play to Gabe Davis where he where they were off sides. That was a big play. And then the other one where he kind of lofted it over the defender's head to Gabe Davis. Like, so there were some big plays out there, right? So, some others where James Cook got some nice run after catch. But look, it all added up to a near flawless performance on offense. So you really can't complain too much.
Yeah, BFLO Mafia News comes in and says, "Hey Josh, save some of those big hits for when the team really needs it." I will say, if there was a negative to Josh Allen's game on Sunday, the attempted hurdle at the goal line, like, come on, we didn't need that, bro. We didn't need that. We didn't need that attempted hurdle. And also on the run that got negated, he took a little bit too long to slide and took a helmet to helmet hit. So he left himself open for a couple of hits, but all in all, he survived those hits. He was healthy, he was fine. But there's definitely maybe a couple of plays here or there where he got a little reckless with the ball in his hands, but it was as a runner. It never really was as a passer, other than the one interception that got called back. And the only reason why the ball got tipped out of his hands was because of the penalty that the Raiders had. So looking at some of the other weapons, let's take a look at the receivers before we get to the running game. And the Buffalo Bills receivers stepped up in this game. Obviously, Stefon Diggs was Stefon Diggs, 7 for 66. He probably would have had a touchdown if Josh Allen would have seen him in the back of the end zone on that 4th and 1 in which they didn't convert. Gabriel Davis had a big day on my fantasy bench, 6 catches for 92 yards and a touchdown. Other receivers who chipped in, Khalil Shakir, 1 for 11 and a touch. Deontay Hardy, 2 for 4. So the Buffalo Bills receivers, it was pretty much your 1 and your 2 who did the damage. The other auxiliary receivers, other than Shakir's touchdown, did not do much. But you look at other position groups, running backs, tight ends, James Cook, 4 for 36. Dalton Kincaid, 5 for 43. Dawson Knox, 3 for 10, a touch. He would have had a bunch of more yards if him and Josh would have connected on that one play that bounced off his chest because they miscommunicated. He would have ran for 20, 30 yards on that play. You had Murray come in for 2 for 9 and Gilliam 1 for 3. So the Buffalo Bills, more so than they ever have under Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen, are getting the ball into the hands of auxiliary weapons, and their top 2 guys stepped up this week.
Top 2 guys stepped up, 7 targets apiece for Davis and Diggs. I was wrong about Davis. I didn't think the matchup was great for him. He proved me wrong, and glad he did, leading the way with 92 yards. Cook really chipped in nicely in the passing game. He had the 4 for 36, but a long of 26, obviously on that one catch and run where it was like a little bit of a busted zone coverage there off the left side. And even Murray had a nice first down reception on one occasion. But to me, Knox and Kincaid, between the 2 of them, right? You had 12 targets between the 2 of them. I like to see that. You had 8 catches between the 2 of them. Kincaid getting, Kincaid got 5 of the, all 5 of his catches really from the second quarter on. He really didn't do anything in the first quarter. And then Knox obviously had the touchdown. So really a nice compliment, those 2 to each other. You could see the way the Bills are trying to start to use those guys as compliments to each other. Knox staying in the block at times, going out in routes, both being on the field, whatever it may be. But spreading the ball around was a godsend in this game. The Bills really kind of did what they wanted at every level of the skill position group when it came to the receiving. And it was like everyone was having fun. Like everyone got in the mix. It was just nice to see. And I don't think anyone in the skill position group on the receiving end left that field unhappy in that one. So look, was it eye-popping statistically for Stefon Diggs? No, not necessarily. He hasn't really had that big, huge play yet down the field, but man, he made it count when he did. And he continues to be the epitome of an alpha wide receiver, toughness, smart, right? Getting down when he can, getting up from that big hit he took on that near first down they made after the turnover. So yeah, I mean, clearly those guys, and a much needed big game for Gabe Davis too, I think, after a slow week 1.
Yeah, I talked about it on the pregame show too, and I'm just going to reiterate this week after week after week. I really do think as the season develops, I want to see this as an offense that's funneled through 3 guys. Obviously, Stefon Diggs is your alpha. He had a good day. I think he could have done better, and I think the Bills could have done a better job getting the ball in his hands, but we were effective and we won the ball game. I think as the weeks progress, he might have a few weeks here or there with that, but I think he'll usually push more towards the 10 reception, 100-yard mark as the season progresses. But Dalton Kincaid and James Cook, one of the things that I was most excited about watching this football game was the fact that even though his stat line was okay, 5 for 43, whatever, I feel like we're just scratching the surface with what Dalton Kincaid can do. And
Yep.
I feel like we saw some things on the football field that could really turn into bigger things in the weeks and months ahead. I really do think something special is incubating there with him as a receiving threat from the tight end position, and James Cook both running the ball and catching the ball as well. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, I'm all about funneling this offense through Diggs, Cook, and Kincaid, and then making guys like Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox your main auxiliary weapons in this offense, and then getting other guys like Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy, Khalil Shakir involved. And I think the Buffalo Bills are well on their way to doing that. The only thing that would stop them from doing that is Gabriel Davis just emerges as like this true alpha wide receiver number 2. And he showed some of that this week against the Raiders, but we're going to need to see that more consistently from week to week from him.
Yeah, but also in a way, playing the Raiders after coming off that really tough week against the Jets, top defense, getting to play this Raiders defense, who was obviously down Chandler Jones and doesn't really have the horses to hang with this Bills offense outside of, Max Crosby being their star. Like, good practice for the Bills, right? Getting these guys involved and like potentially being able to go different directions when it doesn't come as easy in future weeks. Like, you saw what you could get from Gabriel Davis if you have to go to him. You saw what you could get from Kincaid and Cook and Knox in the passing game if you have to go to them. So it might not be that every week everyone gets involved, but now you've got guys that have proven what they can do in this game against the Raiders. And if some things are more open than others in future weeks, that you can go to those things. So a good bit of practice as well for future weeks.
Running the football, I mean, that was fun to watch. It kind of reminded me a little bit of that Bears game last year where we saw Devin Singletary and James Cook sort of just take over and take a lot of that pressure off of Josh Allen. James Cook looks like an absolute stud. Like 159 all-purpose yards, 17 carries for $123 on the ground. I was a little surprised when he was still in there in the fourth quarter that he busted off that big run, and he got it to 123 yards. We on the pregame show, you were like James Cook over 100 all-purpose yards, and I was like, what about over 100 rushing yards? And we were both like, yeah, no, it's not. It's not what the Buffalo Bills do. And then there we go. James Cook does it, averaging 7.2 yards per carry. Damian Harris came in and looked good. 7 carries, 33 yards and a touch. Latavius Murray came in 6 for 22 and a touch. James Cook was just so impressive. There were a number of times where he turned something into nothing. That was really fun to see. There was a number of times where he made a cut and he made a guy miss because he had a mano-a-mano, and then there was just open field, and he just has the speed to take advantage of it. That was so much fun to watch. And then I really do think that we did not have this last year in the goal line and in the red zone. The bruising running backs who can take some of the load, take some of the pressure off of Josh Allen, and Damian Harris and Latavius Murray both this week proved that they can be those types of running backs in goal line and short yardage situations, each getting a touchdown this week. So I'm really looking forward to watching this backfield play out over the course of the season, and off the charts excited for James Cook, and maybe just regular excited for Latavius Murray and Damian Harris in the weeks coming up.
I think the mix of these three guys is the perfect blend of skill sets. I know Latavius Murray is a bit of an upright runner, but man, when he gets north-south, he is just really, if you like football, he's just a fun player to watch run the football. I mean, he gives it his all on every run. You never question the effort, the heart of a guy like Latavius Murray. You can just tell every time he runs the ball, he's running it like it might be his last carry that he ever gets. And I really appreciate that from a guy like that. This is something the Bills have been missing in recent years. We thought it could be Zach Moss as the guy. It just didn't work out that way. And now you have Latavius Murray as that guy. And it's really just really impressive. And then that kind of juxtaposed with James Cook's sort of smooth, easy speed, ability to make guys miss, smooth catching the football. Like there's no wasted motion. There's no wasted motion when he catches the football. It's just smooth and effortless. And like, look, he is not necessarily like the fastest guy, right? There are like guys with better maybe top end speed than him, but like smooth speed is part of this too, right? And playing
Yeah.
speed, and like when he gets down that sideline, like he just has a way to kind of slip
Glides.
past guys. Yeah, just glides past guys, and so
Mhm.
it looked pretty smooth and effortless for him as well. And then you add Harris to the mix, made a nice key third down conversion off that kind of like you know, I don't even know what you would call it. It was kind of like not really a sweep, but where he ran
Mhm.
across the formation and cut up the field on the right side for a key first down. That was a nice play. And you know what I really liked about Damian Harris too in this game is like this is a guy that was a number one running back for the Patriots
Mhm.
before Ramondre took over. Probably could still be a borderline number one running back for teams in the NFL. He makes a nice kick return, and he gets so hyped about it, and, like,
Yeah.
that to me tells me all I need to know about
He
Damian
he
Harris
almost
as
blocked
a
a punt
player.
too. He almost blocked a
Like,
punt.
he's team first, and he fits
Mhm.
so well. He fits so well with this team, and so love the trio of guys, and, like, I hate to say this, but, like, I don't think we're missing Naheem Hines, man. I don't
Yeah,
think we are.
I hate to say it because you don't wanna ever be like, "I'm glad that guy got injured," but, like,
No.
I think that it just took the question mark away, right? I think the only thing that a Nyheim Hines injury has maybe done is, like, maybe taken some of the reps on offense away from Deontay Hardy,
Yep.
and by reps, I mean, 'cause the Bills have been trying to get him the ball. I mean, like, maybe practice reps from Deontay Hardy 'cause
Mhm.
it's kinda looked clunky with him out there, and we'll get to that when we get to the areas of concern 'cause I have a couple of comments on Deontay Hardy, but yeah, you mentioned it with James Cook. Like what we saw in college, the reason why we wanted to draft this dude, he just glides and like the 0 to 100 speed, his ability to just get to top end speed as quickly as he does, the way he glides. And I don't even think he scratched the surface as a receiver either, because we saw in the Jets game, he could be used as a traditional wide receiver, right? And like he can run those wheel routes and he can do all those different things. Like Josh Allen could throw bombs to James Cook. He was on the receiving end of a number of those in college, and the Bills try to get it to him on that wheel route in week number 1. Josh Allen threw it off the defender's helmet. So those guys can possibly connect, as George Pickens is running for a big touchdown right now, like 70-yard tutty from Kenny Pickett, who's hurt. Wow, everyone's just getting hurt this week. Thankfully, the Bills stayed mostly healthy. But yeah, really, really excited. And let's give our flowers to the offensive line. We're 37 minutes in the show. I think we probably should have done that a lot sooner. Obviously, I think the number one takeaway from this game is the fact that the Buffalo Bills shut down Max Crosby and that Spencer Brown looked hella competent in doing so. Despite the
Mhm.
fact that he wasn't graded out very well by PFF, I believe he had a 59 pass blocking grade. Spencer Brown more than held his own against Max Crosby. He got beat a couple of times, but Josh Allen got the ball out quick. The Buffalo Bills chipped on Max Crosby a total of 15 times in the game. It wasn't always taking a receiver out of out of the play though, because they would chip and then they would go and they would run their route. So the Buffalo Bills, kudos to Ken Dorsey, kudos to the players for executing. They did a really good job of not letting Max Crosby affect this football game. And Spencer Brown, mano y mano, had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, and there's people that are gonna like point out like one or two bad reps from Spencer Brown. And it's like you can't like everyone's gonna have some bad reps, but like the fact that we didn't notice Spencer Brown, we'll say, like that's sometimes the thing. Like when you don't notice a corner, right? Because they're not throwing at him. It's kind of like what happened in this game with Spencer Brown on the offensive line. Like, yes, he had help. Yes, they chipped 15 times, but at the end of the day, like we have been well, I know I have, and a lot of people have been very
Mhm.
critical of Spencer Brown. We need more out of him. He struggled a bit week 1, obviously, and so the rumblings had started, right? Like, we got to do something about this. And then he shows up and has a really nice game. And I'm not saying like this path's going to be linear for him. Like he
Mhm.
might still come back and have a couple bad games here and there. And who knows like how this is going to go. But like it was nice to see a step in the right direction. And so hopefully it does continue to progress linearly, but
Mhm.
we don't
And
know. And he
and
just he did really hold his own.
and even if this is peak Spencer Brown, this is the reason why we drafted Dalton Kincaid. The Buffalo Bills now have the horses to run 12 personnel and run 12 personnel effectively. And in running 12 personnel, you can do things like you can chip on some of these elite edge rushers in the National Football League and not have it affect your offense too much. I think the Buffalo Bills, like, we talk every year about someone setting a trend, right? Last week on the pregame show, we talked about how Mike McDaniel was setting a trend, the way he's getting Tyreek Hill free releases. The Buffalo Bills could be setting a trend where it seems like everything nowadays in the National Football League is 11 personnel, 11 personnel, 11 personnel. The Buffalo Bills could be setting a 12 personnel trend, and we could see teams putting an emphasis on adding multiple tight ends to their roster next offseason to try to mimic what the Buffalo Bills are doing. Because if they can do to the Raiders, if they can do that to other teams in the National Football League, if they can make that just an effective weapon for them week after week, stymieing effective edge rushers, even though you don't have the best tackles in the world, getting the ball out quickly, getting the ball in the hands of your playmakers, methodically working the ball down the field. If they can do all those things on a weekly basis, other people are going to try to copy that. And I think the Buffalo Bills might be a little bit trend setting here.
Trend setting. And look, I've mentioned it multiple times, right? That there are very few teams across the league in recent years that have really utilized two tight ends as receivers, right? And the Bills look to now have the horses to not just have to rely on two tight ends, but they can go multiple directions, game planning, depending on the opponent now with the personnel they have. And by the way, if Brown has one, okay, let's see him do it consistently. I agree with that. And that's why I said the progression is not necessarily linear. He may struggle next week. Who knows, against the Commanders, but that those 15 chips to help him out, I'm sure gave him some confidence and sort of got him in the flow of things, and certainly probably helped his psyche a bit there. So look, I mean, it's one game and we know how week to week the league is, but you got to give him some credit this week. Just, in a vacuum, you got to give him credit for this game.
100%. And you got to give credit to the rest of the offensive line as well. I mean, Ken Dorsey, Aaron Cromer, they schemed up a great game plan. Deion Dawkins, he dominated guys he should dominate. I like I said on the pregame show, I think Tyree Wilson is going to be an absolute bust for the Las Vegas Raiders. I think he's all athlete, no football player. So when he was out there on the field, Deion Dawkins was rightfully shutting him down, as he should. Mitch Morse and Connor McGovern and Osiris Torrance, they were getting a really good push. They were really helping our run game. They weren't muddying the pocket for Josh Allen. He had a pocket to step up into. The offensive line and Eric and Anth have already started breaking it down. And I'm sure they will again tomorrow in the film room here on the Cover One Sports Network. The offensive line had a really, really, really good game. And if that continues, man, Connor McGovern's here for the long run, right? Osiris Torrance is here for the long run. Reworking the interior of this offensive line, and on top of that, having some really good depth in David Edwards and Ryan Bates. Positive vibes heading into week 3 and beyond for the Buffalo Bills, especially on that interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, and I made the comment of this a couple weeks back before the season started. Like, maybe the plan all along was like, look, this is going to be a two off-season cycle plan, right? Maybe this cycle was like, let's really get the interior right. Let's invest some draft capital in the interior. Let's make sure we have a contingency plan for Mitch Morse, which they do, and let's really shore up that interior. Maybe next offseason that the plan is to look at tackle, right? We just don't know, but I think given the limitations Brandon Beane had with the salary cap, obviously limited number of draft picks, like they went in and just said, this is what we're going to do. And like, we'll see. And if Spencer Brown continues to improve, then look, doesn't mean tackle's not a need anymore, because they're still quite shallow behind Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. But, we'll see what happens in the offseason. So, yep, I think, if anyone thinks we weren't praising the offense after this week, then watching the wrong show. So I think we covered it.
All right, let's head on over now to the defense, and let's start with the guy that you chose as your Take Me Higher player of the game. You had Matt Milano chosen as your Take Me Higher player of the game, and once again, he is showing that he is just an all-pro caliber football player. He had 4 tackles. He absolutely mossed Josh Jacobs for that interception. He made his presence felt all over that football field. We were really concerned in the pregame about the Raiders running all over us. The Raiders couldn't even get anything going really in the ground game after that first series. Josh Jacobs ran for negative yards. Terrell Bernard was exceptional as well. He had an INT. He was really good in run support. What are your thoughts on, let's start with the linebackers and your guy, Matt Milano, who you had as your Take Me Higher player of the game?
Yeah, I mean, he made that incredible interception, but also just like generally he was around the football. I know he only ended up with 4 tackles, but anytime you see the Raiders kind of like Josh Jacobs getting stymied, whatever, like Milano was there. Like he's around the football. He's always around the football. He's certainly the emotional leader of that defense. He had the big pick. Obviously, that was at a point in time where the game was starting to, shift quite heavily towards the Bills. So it wasn't necessarily like a game changer per se, but still it was a game ender almost, right? So made the big play when it needed to. Super impressive, I guess, ball skills, if you want to call it on that. But he's gunning for another all pro this year if he continues this type of play. And look, there's not, like you mentioned, there's not really like a single guy. Like it wasn't Matt Milano wasn't the reason the Bills won the game, right? On defense. Like the entire defense really played pretty well outside of the first drive. And like we're going to talk about all these guys like Bernard, et cetera. But man, the linebackers, Milano, Bernard, I have been very impressed with Terrell Bernard's play through the first 2 games, considering what my expectations were, which were tepid, I would say, expectations to say the least.
I think one of the best parts about the regular season is it does calm everyone's nerves a little bit, because maybe you start to see the vision, right? Like it's hard to see the vision in the off season until you actually see it play out in the football field. And I'm not saying the Buffalo Bills vision was correct, because we have to see, just like from Spencer Brown and just like from Josh Allen and just like from a number of areas, we need to see it consistently from week to week. But I think you saw this week why the Buffalo Bills drafted Terrell Bernard. I think you saw this week the vision the Buffalo Bills had when they let Tremaine Edmonds walk in free agency. There's a reason why they did what they did, and there was faith. And I think a lot of Bills fans, myself included, lost faith when Terrell Bernard had that hamstring injury. Didn't get to see him in the preseason, had to put up with Tyrell Dodson, who was on the field a ton. The Buffalo Bills utilized 3 linebackers. They took Teron Johnson off the field a little bit to match with some of that heavy personnel, which might be something the Buffalo Bills have to do this year with no Tremaine Edmonds. Okay, we can't rely on nickel against some of these heavy packages anymore. We have to bring out the 3rd linebacker, because we don't have a guy like Tremaine who can just freak his way through and help Teron out. So that was one observation I made. But again, it's just sometimes it's just maybe nice, even if it needs to be more consistent. We need to see it consistently. It's nice to see the vision.
Yeah, and I mean, this is exactly why like all this questioning and everything doesn't really matter until the games actually start getting played, right? And you see these guys, show up and like, look, I mean, I'm sure a lot of Bills fans maybe were rooting for Tremaine Edmonds to have a bad game week 1 against the, tough start to the year for him and that Bears defense. But look, Terrell Bernard has certainly made this less of a concern over the first 2 weeks than probably a lot of people had going into it. And, you and I both sat here and said, it doesn't really do the Bills any good to trot Tyrell Dodson out there as the starter, other than the fact that he had experience, because we knew what we had in him. We knew the ceiling of Tyrell Dodson. We didn't necessarily know what the ceiling of Terrell Bernard was. And so honestly, him getting injured in training camp and into the preseason may have been the best thing for him. Got him maybe that job, won him that job. And maybe that was the plan all along. We might never know, but he's certainly done a good job in kind of stepping his game up the first 2 weeks. I know Eric had pointed some things out around, he tends to follow the quarterback's eyes, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing. But look, you're going to take the good with the bad with Terrell Bernard. It's year 2 for him. Like, many thought maybe this was a wasted draft pick, but it's certainly not looking like that right now. So it is nice to see it pan out so far.
Yeah, Royal Collins comes in and says, George Michael told us years ago, you got to have faith. And speaking of having to have faith, Ed Oliver, monster game. RJ Melville comes in and says, listen, even though there were 0 sacks, this pass rush absolutely affected the game. Jimmy G was also tackled an inch beyond the line of scrimmage. Gregory Rousseau could have easily had a sack there. And we can talk about some of the other guys like Daquan Jones, who I thought had a really good game. Greg Rousseau, who has looked really good for 2 weeks in a row now. And I'm looking forward to seeing him once Von Miller is back, because then I think we'll see the sack production go up as well. We'll see more finishes than we have the last couple of weeks. But obviously, I think the number one talking point on that defensive line is the fact that Ed Oliver through 2 weeks is earning that contract that the Buffalo Bills extension the Buffalo Bills gave him. He has looked like a man possessed out there. But again, like a lot of other players, can he stay healthy and can he stay consistent? That'll be probably the thing that we have to keep an eye on as the weeks progress. But very, very, very reassuring performances through the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the thing with Ed Oliver, right? He'll have a game or two where he splashes but then he'll kind of maybe disappear for another game or two. So you want to see that more consistent upper echelon type of play from Ed Oliver. Groot, yep, so excited what he's been coming. I agree. He's been absolutely fantastic. Leonard Floyd's been great, and obviously he got dinged up in this game, but Daquan Jones with a bunch of good pressures up the middle. Ed Oliver from the get-go, right? That first drive, even though the Raiders ended up scoring, that first play, pretty much just Josh Jacobs ran into his left arm and he just knocked him over against Greg Van Roten, by the way. So it was nice to see that defensive front come out. And by the way, hold Josh Jacobs to -2 yards on 9 carries. That run defense really, if you look at it, right, last week was pretty solid for 97% of the plays as well. Obviously, outside of those 2 big Breece Hall runs, but the run defense through 2 weeks, overall, I've been pretty happy with it for the most part. And so we're going to get tested again next week against Brian Robinson, etc. But the run defense was one of the things we were looking forward to seeing that improvement with this defensive front. And they've, in my mind, answered the call through the first 2 games.
Yeah, 100% answered the call. Really excited about them moving forward. We'll get to Leonard Floyd's ankle injury and what that could mean when we talk about areas of concern in a little bit. But we've talked about the front seven. Let's talk a little bit about the secondary. I thought Hyde and Boyer did a solid job in the middle of that defense. Obviously, Trey White. Devontae Adams got his. He had 6 for 84 early. The Buffalo Bills were really allowing a lot of dump offs to Josh Jacobs that were pretty effective, but it didn't result really in very many points for the Las Vegas Raiders outside of the first drive. So the Buffalo Bills were aggressive. I feel like the Buffalo Bills did not give a lot of cushions outside of giving Josh Jacobs some cushion. And I'll tell you what, 2 weeks in a row, Christian Benford has gone out there and looked really, really good. I know they threw the flag originally, but I think they rightfully picked it up. That was a really good mano-a-mano, one-on-one coverage that I thought Christian Benford had on the receiver there where they picked up that flag. So through 2 weeks, the secondary looks solid as well.
Looks solid, and he got his head around. That was the big key on that play. I'm shocked they picked the flag up, not because I didn't think it was a penalty, but just it's very rare for referees to pick up pass interference flags. You just don't see it very often. So, I thought Trey was good. You held Devontae Adams, an All-Pro. Trey was matched up with him for most of that. He got his. Like, that's what I can't remember who made the comment in the pregame, but it's like, hey, if Devontae Adams gets his 6 or 8 for 90 yards, but Josh Jacobs is held in check, that's going to be fine. And that's really exactly what happened. So they didn't really let Devontae have too many cheap ones, right? I mean, like everything that Devontae caught, I thought was pretty well earned. Wasn't anything super easy. I thought that he got. Obviously, there was that one that kind of went over Poyer, but like that was a little bit of a broken play. So look, secondary did a good job. The corners, I think, are really playing well. We'll see about Hyde's injury, but Poyer was in on a lot of help on and run support as well. So I think the secondary, provided Hyde is healthy, is really trending up as well right now. And look, couple good tests, obviously, with Zach Wilson thrown in the mix in the first week. I don't know how much of a test, but Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, a couple really good receivers the Bills have had to contend with the first 2 weeks, and we'll get another in Terry McLaurin next week, so we'll see how that goes.
All right, on to special teams now. The Buffalo Bills, Tyler Bass, 5 for 5 kicking extra points. He had 1 field goal for 29 yards. Damian Harris had that big kick return for 41 yards. Sam Martin only 1 punt in the game for 54 yards, and it was inside of the 20. So the Buffalo Bills, Deontay Hardy didn't drop anything, right? He fair caught everything perfectly. So the Buffalo Bills did their job on special teams this week, and that's really all you can ask. I will say that, and our guy, Uber Hansen has been hammering this point home. I think there'll be a time in the next couple of years as Justin Tucker starts to age himself out of the NFL, and who knows with kickers, maybe he'll kick till he's 60. But I think there might be a time over the next half a decade here where Tyler Bass might be unanimously looked at as the best kicker in football as Justin Tucker at like ages out. Because the Buffalo Bills, looking at their schedule, they could be playing some tight games this year. Tyler Bass could be put in some really high pressure situations. And I mean, this is a guy that I really feel comfortable and confident knocking some kicks down, as we saw last week in that Jets game, helping us get into overtime.
Yeah, and you look around the league and who the kind of best kickers in the NFL have been over the past several years. You obviously have Justin Tucker at the top of the list. Harrison Butker for the Chiefs has been very good, but he's kind of getting up into the point where maybe he's, he had that injury last year. Is he going to get back to that same form? He's been pretty good so far this year. We'll see. There was a thought in Evan McPherson's rookie year that he would kind of maybe take that mantle, but the Bengals look kind of like a mess right now. So he's not getting a ton of opportunities. And that leaves guys like Tyler Bass kind of at the top of the heap right now as far as kickers and consistency in the league is on a team that he's going to be able to score a lot of points for, whether it's extra points or field goals. So not to mention, as Jessica points out in that last comment, he probably has some of the tougher conditions to kick in. And that's why I think Justin Tucker is maybe the greatest kicker of all time, I think, in my opinion, the greatest kicker of all time, kicking in Baltimore, outdoors, cold, when comparing to other guys. I know Vinatieri kicked in New England for years, but come on, Indy for many years as well. So I'll give it to Justin Tucker. Tyler Bass nipping at his heels, but who knows when Justin Tucker's going to retire, man? I don't know. But special teams, no problem at all this week for the Bills. So keeping it cruising.
All right, let's get in now to maybe some areas for concern. I know there's not a lot of negatives to take out of this football game. I was reading Sale Capaccio's arrow up, arrow down this week, and he gave an arrow up to a player that wasn't even active on game day. He gave an arrow up to Kingsley Jonathan because in the post-game press conference, Spencer Brown was like, yeah, Kingsley Jonathan was the one in charge of mimicking Max Crosby all week, and he really challenged me and gave me a hard time, and that's what helped me perform so well out there on the football field. So that's the kind of day it was where like we were giving arrow ups to players who weren't even playing in the game. So not a lot of negatives to sort of pick at here. Looking at maybe some of the things, obviously a number of the fans were upset with the first series, both on offense and defense. Let's start with maybe the first series on offense. I was disappointed. I let my emotions get the better of me. I put out a tweet saying it was JV football because I do think it was JV football the way we came out and started this football game. Run, pass. Like it. First run doesn't work. Okay, cool. You come out, you run a draw on the first play, whatever. It doesn't work. You go back to the well on second down, despite the fact that analytics tells you that doubling down on your mistake of running the ball on first down is the wrong thing to do. So I'm not an analytics guy like 100,000%, but the analytics tell you, like, don't compound your mistake with another mistake. And running the ball on second down after running the ball unsuccessfully on first down is compounding a mistake with a mistake. So to put yourself in that tough third down situation after they score a point, to get yourself off the field, to only have the ball in the best player in your team's hands one time in that first drive, like, I was really, really upset by that. Like, I was mad, and I was really happy to see that they corrected that after the first series, and we never really saw that again.
Yeah, it was nice that even by like the middle of the first quarter, really, you kind of forgot about that. And look, it was a little frustrating. And you wondered, like, oh no, is it going to be one of those games where we don't really have a plan? And it turned out anything but, right? So it's just a little weird that, like, usually it's like the opposite. And you see what the Raiders did, like, had a great first series and then it kind of like fell apart for them. Or for the Bills, it was like a little bit the opposite, like really a bad first series, and then it kind of went the other way for the Bills. So just kind of a weird scenario there, but ultimately, like, against better teams, like you hope that like your first series is going to be better down the road. So like, yes, it was the Raiders, and you can, and ultimately the first series, like at the end of the day, is like, how many times is it really going to matter that you do something with it? But knowing that the Bills had just given up points, and then you come back out on your home opener, your first series, and you go run past, it was a little bit frustrating. But again, nitpicking a bit here because they did obviously correct afterwards.
speaking of that first drive for the Raiders, I mean, they came right down the field. They went 75 yards in only 5 plays, and they scored a touchdown. They put our guys in conflict, our biggest fear, using things like misdirection, getting Trey Tucker involved, and that big play, getting Devontae Adams involved, that big play, just marched right down the field, utilizing screen passes, getting just right down the field and scoring a touchdown. I made the comment on Twitter, and it ended up being very prophetic. One of the few times I've ever been prophetic when live analyzing a football game. It's like, well, we did this under Leslie Frazier too, where we came out, we got punched in the mouth, we kind of saw what they had, and then we adjust from there, and the defense settles down. And then sure enough, that's exactly what the Buffalo Bills did, allowing just 3 points the remainder of the game. But at the same time, while the strategy worked against the Las Vegas Raiders, will it work against the Miami Dolphins? Will it work against the Kansas City Chiefs? Will it work against the some of the other juggernauts that we have to face this year? I think the Buffalo Bills need to find a better way to figure out what the other offense wants to do, other than let them march down the football field and score right away. But at the end of the day, you can't complain because of the results after that first drive.
Yeah, and I think if you're the Raiders, and yes, maybe it was scripted plays, why didn't you go back to some more of that later in later drives? I was just completely shocked that they didn't even give Trey Tucker another touch after that. I don't think he had another touch in the game after that big run he had, on that sweep, that jet sweep. Why weren't the Raiders doing more of that? So that concerned me. If the team would have stuck to some things that were working, it could have posed problems for the Bills. And then Eric is starting to do some really good film work on the Bills defense as well, showing that look, some of the things this Bills team got away with because the Raiders are just not that good of a team. There are some missed opportunities for the Raiders.
There could be some. So the screen passes, right? That's been a problem. It was a problem against the Jets. It was a problem against the Raiders early. And Eric, mentioned, he's like, hey, I'm going to talk about this in the film room tomorrow. So check out the film room tomorrow. But Jimmy Garoppolo missed some stuff over the middle of the field. And that was the word that he used that frightened me, because Jordan Boyer, Micah Hyde, they're both getting up there. And if it's over the middle of the football field, that the Buffalo Bills were sort of leaving some receivers open, that's awfully concerning if you're a Buffalo Bills fan. Now, it might not bite us in the butt against the Raiders. It might not bite us in the butt against the Commanders, but it sure as heck will against the Miami Dolphins, right? Yes. It sure as heck will against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, even though they're struggling right now. It will against Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. So while it's all good now, I think there's definitely maybe some indicators that maybe it's not all great, and the Buffalo Bills are going to have to make some adjustments before we start playing some tougher competition.
Yeah, and this kind of gets back to my point earlier about having this good quote practice. Seeing what the Bills could take out of this game is not just about hey, this is a great win. Let's figure out some of the things that maybe we can look at that we did well, and bring that into a future game plan. But also let's take a look and be realistic with the fact that in a 38-10 win, we can go back and look at the film and see that there were things that really could have hurt us, right, if a better opponent was on the other side of the ball. So it's great, but McDermott's going to have these guys back in, in the building and looking at that film and saying look, if this is Tua, or if this is Patrick Mahomes, or if this is Justin Herbert, we're probably not getting away with the same type of outcome.
According to the comment section, the number one thing the Bills can do better next week is to give Kingsley Jonathan a chance. Right. So, hey, and it's unfortunate, but I think we might get our wish next week, because Leonard Floyd, who's been great, ankle injury. I'll tell you what, just it's just a gut instinct. I think Micah Hyde plays against the Commanders. I don't think Leonard Floyd plays against the Commanders. So I think you might get your wish, and I think you might see Kingsley Jonathan this week. AJ Epinesa will probably start at right end, or Shaq Lawson, and then Kingsley Jonathan will be part of the rotation. I think Leonard Floyd is probably going to miss a week or two with that ankle injury. But again, that's just Sean McDermott said day to day. That's just gut feeling for me.
And it just seems like that's an injury that you don't want to mess with for a guy that relies on some bend off the edge, right? You don't it's different than if that was maybe an interior defensive lineman, right, where that bend in that plant wasn't as important, especially to Floyd's game, right? So I want him healthy, and if he misses a game, to get 100%, then I'm good with that.
And another thing too, is just you might look at it as I'm not trying to disrespect Sam Howell and what Eric Bieniemy is doing there in Washington, because that offense is humming right now. But I think you look at it and you're Sean McDermott and you're like, okay, I have confidence that we can scheme up a game plan without Leonard Floyd to shut down Sam Howell. I'm a little less confident I can do that against Tua Tagovailoa in 2 weeks. So I want Tua, or I want Leonard Floyd for that game against Tua. So that goes into it as well. Can I have one overreaction this week? Am I allowed to have one overreaction this week?
Yeah.
All right. So here's my overreaction of the week. And again, this is something where I'm going to watch it play out over the next couple of weeks, but I think the player I'm most disappointed in through 2 weeks of the season, and this dates back to the preseason as well, Deontay Hardy. I'm disappointed. Like when we were told about him when he signed and we went through and we analyzed some of his stuff from his time in New Orleans, even though he was an oft injured player, Eric and Ant and a lot of those film guys did a really good job breaking down how the Buffalo Bills could utilize Deontay Hardy in a number of ways that, the Miami Dolphins utilize Tyreek Hill, and that he has this game-changing, game-breaking speed. This is a guy that was a former all-pro punt returner just a couple of seasons ago. Now, I'm not comparing him to Tyreek Hill. That's crazy stupid. But what I'm saying is 1 or 2 plays a game, he has this game-breaking speed that can be utilized, that can pop, that can make these game-changing plays. I didn't see it in the preseason on punts. I didn't see any really explosion, any burst. I'm not seeing it thus far in the regular season. The Buffalo Bills are trying to get him the football. They're trying to get him the ball in space, and it's just not working. And again, maybe this is just got to get comfortable, got to get confident. It's a matter of weeks away. But I'm starting to think like maybe the injuries have really like taken something away from Deontay Hardy, and maybe he doesn't have that same pop that the Buffalo Bills thought that they were investing in. And again, I'm just going to disclaimer this, that it's probably an overreaction on my part, but it's something I'm going to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks. And these design plays underneath for Deontay Hardy, if it doesn't get better over the next couple of weeks, I think you give Khalil Shakir a chance to operate in that same manner and get some of those underneath stuff, because he's a pretty good guy. He's a running back with the ball in his hands, Khalil Shakir. He's a very contact bouncy guy. He doesn't have the speed Deontay Hardy does, but he certainly has that contact balance. I wouldn't mind getting him the ball on some of those underneath stuff.
Yeah, you're entitled to your overreaction. I think I slightly disagree because I also feel like it's partly on the coaches, right? Because I don't know how many really great opportunities Hardy's had. I also feel like the volume of opportunities just across the board for the skill position players, like especially in week 2, was really spread out. Week 1 was obviously a wash. 2 weeks in, like I still think there's a plan for Hardy to get involved, and I think like maybe because Ken Dorsey, this is a new, a new type of player for him, and probably the priority I would imagine was to figure out how to get Kincaid in the mix more so than Hardy, obviously being the first round draft pick. So there's time, I think. And so through 2 weeks, yeah, you're probably right, but I don't know that I'm ready to turn the page on it, so to speak.
Yeah.
But
and a couple of people making some really good comments, like Spin coming in saying it's going to be hard for our slot receivers to get in a groove with how much 12 personnel we're running. Jessica Tennis saying how, it's the way it's schemed up too. I wouldn't mind too. Like we saw it in the preseason a little bit, and we saw it in training camp a little bit, like those trips formations with wide receivers where Deontay Hardy was the guy behind like Gabriel Davis and Trent Sherfield, sort of getting him some free releases off the line of scrimmage. The Buffalo Bills probably didn't want to do it week 1 because it was the New York Jets, and then probably didn't want to do it week 2 because they were trying to correct all their mistakes from the New York Jets. But as we get maybe Josh Allen gets a little bit more back into a groove, as the Bills start to get a little bit more confident about opening up the offense again and not just taking the underneath stuff, maybe getting Deontay Hardy working the ball down. He's not just a gadget guy, right? Like when Brandon Beane sold him to the public, it wasn't, this is our Isaiah McKenzie now. It was, this is a guy who's legit wide receiver 4, inside, outside, can work the ball underneath, can work the ball down the field. So getting Deontay Hardy involved in the deep passing game, which is something that we saw this time in New Orleans, is something that the Buffalo Bills should probably start considering over the next couple of weeks as well. So it's an overreaction on my part, but it's definitely disappointing. And a couple of people have mentioned Trent Sherfield too, but I'm not so discouraged with Trent Sherfield. He got hyped up a bunch in training camp, but to me, he's just a really good blocking receiver, a guy who might catch 15, 20 balls a season. I wasn't expecting like game-breaking major contributions from Trent Sherfield. I'm just happy with his special teams. I'm happy with his blocking ability. I'm happy with the catch here there. It was Hardy that I thought would have a bigger role in this offense.
Yeah, from an offensive standpoint, I mean, Hardy's the guy that gave the more money to. He is the guy that's more notably an offensive weapon. Obviously, Sherfield has the hands. We documented that quite well through the offseason. His really good and low drop rate. We thought maybe there was some opportunity for him playing behind Waddle and Hill, was a little bit overshadowed, and obviously had the good camp. But again, it was always going to be tough for him to be like a major factor. We just figured like maybe he'd have a few more looks so far. But again, it's only been 2 games, so we'll see.
All right, let's move on now. And obviously we do our pregame show, and we'll be doing our pregame show again live this Sunday for Bills Commanders. We'll start at the same time that we always do, right around 11:45 before the 1 p.m. kickoff. But some early thoughts, Dave, on this Bills Commanders matchup that we're going to see next week. The offense is humming. Eric Bieniemy, Sam Howell looking good. And that defensive line is filthy. And that is probably my biggest concern heading into week number 3. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you had to worry about Max Crosby this week. You're going to have to worry about all 4 guys next week. Look, they've played the Cardinals and the Broncos. I get that. They're 2-0. They're still 2-0. I mean, my best friend, he's a Broncos fan. They were up 21-3, and you should have seen some of the texts he was sending me when they blew that lead. I mean, it was just, I felt so bad, but like the enemy's got Sam Howell cooking a little bit here, and he's being efficient with the football. They have some players on offense. Obviously, we know about Terry McLaurin, but some nice complementary pieces as well. We liked Jahan Dotson in the pre-draft process. Curtis Samuel has been a bit of an enigma since he went over to Washington from Carolina. Hasn't been able to stay healthy, but he's had a decent start to this season. And then they've got that tandem of Brian Robinson, who's more of the thumper, and Antonio Gibson, who I still think is a talented running back, who's more of the receiving threat. And they have a pretty good and decent, group of skill position players there. So look, I personally think the Commanders are a significantly better team than the Raiders, the team we just played. So I think it will be a bigger test for the Bills. It's on the road. It's obviously the story of McDermott and Rivera, which always happens, right? But the Bills, the last time they played, the Commanders just owned them. So hopefully that's the same result, different faces. But yeah, I think this will definitely be a bigger test for the Bills than what the Raiders were this past week.
We got Tristan Canez coming in saying, Judge, last time the Bills played the Commanders, you took the Commanders. You're going to do the same. I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna fact check this. And if I did, shame on me. Because was that 2 years ago we played the Commanders, or was it last year?
I thought it was.
We played them last. No, we played them last year.
Last year, yeah.
I think I picked the Bills to win every game last year because I think I made that mistake like 2 years ago, picking against the Bills one time, and they won, and people wouldn't let it go. So like my whole philosophy since then was never pick against Josh Allen, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
2021. So they didn't play him last year.
I will have to go back and fact check that one. But if I did, shame on me, and I will not be doing it again. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see Chase Young, contract year, look like a man possessed in that game. Deron Payne came up limping a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see what his health is. Jonathan Allen's a freak. Montez Sweat is a freak. Jamin Davis looked like he started to pop a little bit. They got some dudes in that secondary. Emmanuel Forbes is a ball hawk, is an absolute ball hawk too. So it'll be really interesting to see. And Brian Robinson, 18 carries for 87 yards and 2 tutties. We thought Jonathan Jacobs was a test. Brian Robinson is going to be a test, as well as Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, one of our favorites from the pre-draft process a couple of years ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much again. If you want to support us here at the Air Raid Hour, number one is that you can go and you can get your pizza at Picasso's Pizza, because I forgot to do this ad read earlier. So if you are Mr. Picasso and you're watching this, I am so sorry, but they have 4 great Western New York locations: Blaisdell, Lancaster, West Seneca. You can order online at picassospizza.net. and you can order it even if you are an out-of-town Bills fan for your out-of-town tailgate. It gets mailed straight to your door, and it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. But if you're looking for a way to support us here at the Air Raid Hour, you can comment on this video once it's done. What is your biggest takeaway from the Buffalo Bills Week 2 game against the Las Vegas Raiders? What are you looking forward to Week 3 versus the Washington Commanders? All those various different things. Before we head out, again, guys, thank you so much. This show is absolutely nothing without you guys in the comment section holding us accountable, like Jessica Tennant is here. So I'll have to go back and check on that video. Hopefully, apparently we were at BF then, so hopefully they kept the video. Hopefully, do you think they just wiped us clean and clear?
I'm sure we're wiped from the we're wiped from the hard drive over there.
We are scraped from the hard drive, but I'll go back and check if it's still there. But thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. You guys do make the show 100% what it is. We would have been done probably like 45 minutes ago if it was just the two of us talking into a microphone. So thank you guys so much. Dave, any final thoughts before we head out here?
No, look, I mean, obviously much better feeling than we were a week ago, but that's the beauty of the NFL, man. It's just, that's why the NFL is king week to week. You just always have a chance if you're any team. So let's make sure we take care of business against the Commanders. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So let's get ready for that pregame.
Just like the Raiders, let's take care of business. And until next time, Dave, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!